just glad you don't come in here and say, that's not what you said last time. I don't remember what I say from one week to the next.
I have a contract, and then we are going to close. Yeah, and then I put an offer. I did not get, although I give a full price, I did not get accepted. So I said, closing date, I did put a short. The reason they sent my contract because of full price, that closing date is short.
Okay.
I put it 20 days.
Right.
And then, so it's not that time. And then they said if you closing date is right now March 10 to be extended 20 days, March 20th. And then listing agent sent me a letter. If you close after 24th of March, we're going to charge you $2,200 a day because of delayed closing.
And why can't you close sooner?
Oh, we tried to close on 20th. Everybody happy to be closed.
Is it because of the loan? Are they getting a loan?
Yeah, conventional loan.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. 20 days is pretty close, pretty hard for a conventional loan to close in 20 days. Okay, yeah, he's got the light on, so we'll go ahead and get started. So we'll get going with the class. So we're actually covering the 1 to 4 family residential contract today. There are multiple purchase money contracts. This is the one that you're going to be faced with using probably the most. The second one that you'll probably see is new construction contract, but a big majority of the time you're going to be using the builder's contract. So you won't even be using the TREC new construction contract. You'll be using the one that the builder is going to provide whenever you meet with the sales office there. There's an unimproved property contract. There's a farm and ranch contract. There's a condominium contract. There's commercial contracts. So there's several different contracts out there. This one, for most agents that are inside of a brokerage, will cover a big majority of the transactions that you're doing. In the event that you're faced with doing one of those other types of transactions, I think you'll find that it kind of flows together. They're very similar. Obviously, it's more specialized in the other arenas. And if you've got questions about that specific topic, don't hesitate to get hold of either myself or Veronica or some of the other experienced agents in the office. They'll be glad to kind of point you in the right direction. So I think there's kind of a process to kind of get some things done before you actually have the opportunity to write the contract or make the offer on the home that your buyer is looking at. If you've been out looking at houses, you're finally at one that is appearing to meet the needs of what your buyer has told you they want. Now, you've done a great needs assessment with them to determine what it is they're looking for. What's their ideal house? Where do they want to be? How many bedrooms? What does it look like? That kind of deal. And you finally are at a house that you think kind of meets their needs, and all of a sudden they start really kind of making an attachment to that house. And you'll learn as an agent when that happens. If they're buying the house for their own personal use, they start mentally moving into that house. They start placing furniture in the house. They might even start talking about family events at the house and how great this house will be for birthday parties or Christmas or whatever it is. And when they start making, to me, those kinds of mental attachments to the house, then that's a great opportunity for you to remind them of what their needs said that they wanted and how closely this house is aligned with that one, and would this be a house that they'd like to go ahead and submit an offer on. So don't be afraid to make that suggestion. Sometimes they're waiting for you to make that suggestion. I had an agent a couple of years ago who was kind of getting a little frustrated with her buyer. She'd been out showing them houses weekend after weekend, and finally kind of got a little flabbergasted with them and said, guys, I've shown you nearly 30 houses. When will you make a decision about which house you think you might want to buy? And they kind of came back and said, well, we liked one of the houses you showed us like on the first or second weekend, because you didn't say anything about it. We didn't think you thought it was a good deal for us. So sometimes the client's kind of waiting for you to also help validate what they're thinking. So don't be afraid to kind of gently push them and say, would you be interested in putting in an offer? I don't think we have to be that kind of used card salesman, like I can get you in this house today, you know, $0 down, $100 a week kind of deal, but you do have to kind of give them the validation that it's okay to move forward in writing an offer. In some instances, they might even suggest, well, call and see if they'll take this. In other words, make a verbal offer. Well, you know what? We could, but in this market that we're in right now, sellers want to work with serious buyers. And the way to show that you're serious is to put your offer in writing. And you kind of have to have your buyer understand that writing an offer isn't going to cost them any money. It's going to cost you a little bit of time and effort, but it's really more important for them to put their offer down in writing than to just make a verbal offer. If the price was the only consideration in writing an offer on a home, our contract would be 1 page long, right? But it's not. It's 8 or 9 pages long. So there's lots of conditions that we need to cover inside the offer, and that's why it's important for them to go ahead and take that verbal offer and put it in writing so that they get a serious consideration by the seller. There's some homework that you need to do before writing that offer. First would be kind of collecting some of the documents that the listing agent has collected from the seller when she listed the house. So if you've been with me in the listing class, what are some of the documents that the listing agent is presenting to the buyer, the seller, for them to complete in order for the buyer to get those documents? What are we looking for? Seller's disclosure.
Listing agreement.
Say it again.
Listing agreement.
Well, the buyer doesn't get to see the listing agreement, but that is a form that's completed, but the buyer doesn't get to see the listing agreement. So what is it that the listing agent is having the seller to complete so that the buyer can see some information about the property, like the seller's disclosure?
Like all the different, are the addendums, like the lead base?
Yeah, there could be a lead-based paint, mud disclosure if it's in a water district.
And then survey, and sometimes.
Sometimes they're collecting the survey from the seller and they're putting that out there. Now, if the listing agent has collected this information, most of the time they're kind of putting it on the MLS so that you have easy access to that. Have you guys seen that when you're in the MLS? When you kind of do your searches on the houses and you open up your screen with one particular property, right below the photo, which is on the left-hand side, you'll see the word docs. If you see docs there, and when you put your cursor on top of that, it will open up another window that puts PDFs that the listing agent has scanned and put inside that MLS. And that's where we're going to find seller's disclosure, surveys, mud disclosures. It could even be some forms that the listing agent just thought were helpful for a buyer to have, or even for the buyer's agent to have. Maybe a list of upgrades. Sometimes they might have even gone to the trouble of getting the average utility bills. I had one seller one year that wanted to list the name, well, I guess you really kind of put the sex and the age of the children that were on the street. Because it was important for her when she bought the house to be in a neighborhood with her other kids that were similar in age to her kids. So she thought, well, I want to advertise that for other young families so that they know that when they're buying a house, they're looking at a house that's got, you know, two 2-year-olds across the street and a 4-year-old down here and a 10-year-old down on the corner, so that, you know, they can kind of understand, you know, what kind of neighborhood they were buying in. So you sometimes will get documents that you need in order to write the offer. You'll also get some kind of more just marketing pieces, things that I think would be helpful for your buyer to take a look at. So you want to collect that. Now, if you don't see the word docs, that does not mean that there aren't docs. It means that the listing agent hasn't put them out there yet. Sometimes it may be a brand new listing and she just hasn't had a chance to scan those and put those out there. Or in some instances, listing agents might not put them out there on purpose because they want you to call them and get them directly from the listing agent. They want to hear from an agent who's getting ready to write an offer on one of their properties so that they can have a conversation with them beforehand. So if you don't see docs, don't make the assumption, well, I guess there's not a disclosure. There is. You just can probably have to call the listing agent to get them to send that over to you either via email or by fax. So once you've collected those documents that you need to go with your offer, the next step would be to do a CMA on the property. Kind of put your appraiser hat on at this point and pull up other homes in that neighborhood of a similar size, similar location, similar amenities, and try to say, if I was an appraiser, what would I appraise this house on based on the sales of other homes in the neighborhood over the last 4 to 5 months? Just because the seller has it priced at $200,000, and just because we've kind of done some general research and we found out that most houses sell for 95% of list price, does not mean this house should go for somewhere, around $180,000, $190,000, right? It means that we need to do our research and determine whether or not this house is priced to sell at $200, overpriced at $200, or underpriced at $200. And the only way we do that is by doing a CMA on the home. So, do a CMA and present the CMA to the buyer so that they see what your pricing recommendation is based on the list price of the house, so that they can help make their offer based on the evidence of what's taking place in the market, what their desire is to purchase that house, and move forward. Okay? So now that I've kind of, yes ma'am.
Sorry, I had a quick question with the CMA.
Mhm.
Is there anything on the KW site for us to kind of help in that process?
There isn't, but there's really one more in HAR.
Okay.
So when you're in HAR and you do your search criteria and try to get it, within a certain age range, square footage range, obviously similar neighborhood, bedroom count, bathroom count, pool, no pool, you're kind of pulling those up, and you put your criteria in there and 10 houses come up. Well, 10's a lot. So then I'm probably going through each one of those and trying to look for the ones that are closest to this subject property, upgrades, maybe the lot size, or this one doesn't back up to a busy street, but that one did, so you can kind of pull the ones that you think are closest to it. So then I can kind of select those in my list, and then you have a CMA wizard inside the MLS where you can click that, and it does a really nice little calculation and presentation for you. So play with it. Go do a CMA on your house, or your neighbor's house. So just go pick a listing that's out there and say, I'm going to pretend to write an offer on that, and kind of play with it inside the MLS. And I think you'll get more comfortable with how to do that. Okay? So now that I've done my CMA, the next thing that I do want to do is I do want to start writing out the offer. Now, ideally, we'd like to start this inside Dotloop. That's what we're learning as a Keller Williams agent. It's a tool that's provided to us so that we can collect all the paperwork correctly, get the signatures done if we wanted to electronically, and we can then, once the contract is complete, submit it through Dotloop for compliance review, right? So inside Dotloop, when you start a loop, we've got templates already set up for you to where you can go down and select a template that will probably give you more than you want on the forms that could go with your offer. So you can select that template, go through the template and decide, well, I don't need that form, I know I don't need that form, I know I don't need that form, and put them in your loop. Or you can put it all in your loop, and then when you've got them in your loop, you can hide them so that you don't look at those forms any longer. Either way works for you. You just have to decide how you want to do it best. So most of what we go over today will already be in that template. And then, of course, you're going to be adding some of the things that we collect to go with that loop. So the first thing that we're going to identify in our offer is the names of the parties. And the first blank is the name of the seller. So how do we find out who the seller of the property is? The appraisal district, the tax record is a great first place to start. But keep in mind, as we've said before, that the tax record is not necessarily reflective of the deed record. So be cautious, proceed with caution. A lot of times it will line up exactly, but there will be times where it might not. And if it doesn't, then you really need to get some clarification from the listing agent to find out why it's different. I like looking at the tax record, assuming that's correct, then looking at the documents that the listing agent has given me that the seller has signed, seller's disclosure primarily, right? And if the names of the seller's disclosure match the names that are on the tax record, I feel like I've hit the jackpot. Yay, it matches. I can move forward now. If they're different, then that's kind of a little red flag going, why don't they match? Because the listing agent should have done her homework when she listed the property to ensure that she properly identified the names of the sellers, and that's who's providing the seller's disclosure, okay? So once I have that clarity, then I'm going to put down here in paragraph 1 the name of the sellers, and then also I'm going to identify the names of my buyer. It's either single, or obviously it could be multiple people. It could be an LLC, it could be a corporation. Just depends on how they're going to take title to the property, is how I'm putting down the name of the buyer. For most of us, we're going to be working with individuals or single people, and we put their names there in paragraph 1. In paragraph 2, we're going to describe the property by its legal and physical address. So this should come directly off the MLS. So just when you're looking at the MLS, you want to probably copy it exactly what it says on the MLS here in paragraph 2A. If it says Lot 3, Block 4, Village of, Champion Forest, Section 5, then that's what I'm going to put on here. And then I want to put the county and the physical address of the property there in paragraph 2A also. Now, if you're dealing with property that's not in a subdivision, that's going to be property that's going to be described by a meets and bounds legal description. And the meets and bounds legal description does not fit in our little blanks here. A meets and bounds legal description can be a paragraph long or paragraphs long. So, if you've got a piece of property that is the meets and bounds, you'll know it by looking at the legal description that is in the MLS, because it won't use the words lot and block. It'll say something like a 2.4 acre tract in the John Smith Survey A4293, some reference to where I could go find that meets and bounds legal description in the county clerk's records. So that 2.4 acre little sentence that they give you is not the legal description, it's really just a marker of where to go find the legal description. So the listing agent will need to provide to you the meets and bounds. That meets and bounds legal description will need to be attached as an exhibit to your contract, okay? Then in paragraphs 2B and 2C, we're describing what's being sold with the dirt. We just described the dirt in A, now we're saying in this too. This mimics, it mirrors exactly what the listing agreement said the seller wanted to sell when he signed the listing agreement. When he met with the listing agent, he goes, "Agent, I want to list this property for sale. Everything in paragraphs 2A and B are exactly the same as what's in paragraphs 2A and B on the listing agreement. If there's anything in that list that the seller goes, well, I understand that should go with the property, but I want to retain that, I want to remove that," what do we call those? Exclusions. So, how would I know if the seller had an exclusion? Yeah, there's a blank on the MLS where the listing agent can kind of wave their hand and go, aha, we've got an exclusion here. So look at the exclusions field. If you see something that's described there, and usually it could be an item or items, or it could even say call agent or call for a list, that means there's exclusions. Sometimes you'll see a listing agent that will put none or NA in that field, which means that we can make the assumption there are no exclusions. Now, if the listing agent and the seller have identified an exclusion, does that mean that we have to honor it?
It's negotiable.
What?
It's negotiable.
That's right. Everything's negotiable. So, I'm walking through the house and I go, oh, just FYI, these drapes here in the dining room are excluded. And Mrs. Buyer turns around and goes, but I love those drapes. We don't have to say, well, sorry, let's go on to another house. We can say, well, you know what? Money talks. Let's see if we can't negotiate those to be left. Okay? All right. Paragraph 3 is our offer. So in paragraph 3, we're going to break down the offer into 3 parts. So 3C is the true offer of the property. So how much do they want to pay for the house? So let's say that they're making an offer of $200,000 for that house. That's what we've decided after looking at the CMA, that they want to offer $200,000 for the house. Then we've got to break down that $200,000 into how much is going to be in the form of a cash at closing and how much is going to be in the form of financing or from lenders at closing. So if they've met with their loan officer and the loan officer has said, you guys, y'all should do a conventional loan with 10% down, then we need to take that verbatim. So I'm going to put 10% in paragraph 3A and the difference in 3B. The totals should equal what we want to offer for the property. Now, if I put anything greater than 0 in paragraph B, I must do something in paragraph 4. If I had 0 in paragraph B, what kind of offer would I have?
Cash.
It'd be a cash deal. And if I have cash, I get to skip the financing paragraph, which is paragraph 4, because there's no financing. But unfortunately, we're not going to be working with every buyer being a cash buyer. Most of the time, we're going to have something to do with financing, and we're going to have to do something in paragraph 4. So paragraph 4, financing, is broken into 3 parts. We've got our third-party financing. We've got our assumption, right? And we've got our seller financing. Now, we have to pick the box that we're going to use. There's a box next to those letters. So make sure that you pick the box that you're going to use. It could be one, or it could be a combination of these 3. 98% of the time, it's going to be one of those boxes, but you could have a deal that might have third-party financing and seller financing. Right now, we're not in a market where assumptions are very strong because interest rates are still very low. If interest rates start to slide up, which all predictions are that they might, if we get back in a 6 or 7% interest rate market, all these FHA loans that have been made over the last several years in the 3s and low 4s will be highly attractive, assumable loans. So we could get back into a market where people want to assume the loan that's in place. Right now, it's not very attractive to do that. So it could be that we might end up in that market here in the future. So make sure you check the box of the type of financing that your buyer is going for in paragraph 4. And then inside 4A, let's use that one as the example, you're going to have 2 different levels of approval. The first one's going to be property approval. And the second one's going to be credit approval. So let's talk about property approval because this is really key. It doesn't have any blanks to fill in, but it's really an important little sentence that's there in paragraph 4A1. It basically makes a statement that the property must meet the lender's underwriting requirements. In a parentheses, it gives you a definition of what those requirements could be. And it says if it fails to do so, the buyer may terminate and receive a refund of their earnest money. So that's really important. Anytime we're giving earnest money back, we should figure out why. So when a lender makes a loan against the property, he's taking a security interest in that property, and he's wanting to make sure that the security interest he's taking in that property is on property that meets certain guidelines for him, the lender, right? What's the primary guideline that a lender wants to make sure property is met? Appraisal, value. So he's going to hire an independent third-party appraiser to go out and make sure that this contract offer of $200,000 can be substantiated with evidence that's taking place in the market. He's going to look at other transactions that have taken place between other parties to ensure that these people aren't crazy for paying $200,000 for this house. So he's going to do an appraisal on that property. Now this is important because most lenders like to be at what loan to value? What is the ideal maximum loan to value that lenders like to be at? what their ideal ratio is?
80 to 20.
80%. 80% LTV. That's the ideal LTV that they like to be at, which means that if they're only going to make loans of 80% of the value, that means that buyers have to have how much down? 20% down. Now, is this buyer putting 20% down? No, he's only putting 10% down. So how is the lender going to get himself comfortable making a 90% LTV when he'd really rather be at 80% LTV? Well, it could, but it might not. If it was going to price for 210, don't you think the seller would have raised his price?
Either the prices of the buyer buys based off the 10% cash.
You mean put more money down?
Yes.
Possibly, but they've only got $20,000 plus their closing costs. That's all the money they got. So how can the lender protect himself on the other 10%? You guys know the answer, you're just forgetting it.
The seller.
What kind of insurance? PMI, private mortgage insurance. Not hazard insurance like we all have on our houses and on our cars, but the lender is getting an insurance policy that in the event he has to take this property back and he can't sell it for what is owed on the property, he can make a claim against the insurance policy for up to 10%. Okay? So that's why PMI is there for conventional lenders. Now, are there other ways that a lender can get comfortable making a loan for more than 80% LTV?
FHA.
Government guaranteed. Because there's three types of government guaranteed loans. What are they? You said the first one. FHA, what's another one? VA. And then we've got USDA, which is a form of kind of a FHA type loan. But those are kind of your typical, these are really your two big government guaranteed loans. In other words, if the lender makes an FHA loan and this buyer defaults and the lender has to take the property back, does the lender take a hit on that property?
No.
No. What does he do? He makes a claim against HUD, who then pays him what his difference is. HUD then takes those houses and what do?
So they sell it.
They sell them. That's what HUD foreclosures are, is all these FHA loans that went bad that are now back on the market because the government had to take them back over. So, you kind of understand the purpose of this sentence, that the property is going to have to meet the lender's underwriting requirement, and if it fails to do so, the buyer may terminate and get a refund of their money. In other words, anytime a buyer is doing an FHA, a VA, or a conventional loan where he's putting less than 20% down, this sentence protects him if the property doesn't appraise for at least the sales price. Okay? Now, what if I had a buyer with some money? If this house, and he was doing a conventional loan because he's putting a lot of cash down, right? If this property appraised for $190, would the lender still make him a loan for $140?
Sure.
Yes, because he's below 80% LTV still. Now, is the buyer going to be super happy about the fact that the property didn't appraise, it came in $10,000 less than what he was willing to pay for it? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, we sat there and gave him a CMA and said, yeah, it's really close to $200,000 based on what we're looking at. Here comes the appraiser, he thinks he knows better, and he puts it at $190. And now our buyer's kind of looking at us going, what are you doing? You said it was worth $200. I don't want to pay $200 for a house that's really only worth $190. I want out. I want to terminate.
So.
Is there any way in here where we've given him the right to terminate? Does this sentence give him the right to terminate if the lender's still going to make him the loan? No, the property still meets the lender's underwriting requirement. And we're out of our option period because usually the appraisal is done after the option period. So the only way that we can help a buyer who's got a significant cash position in a property is to protect them is by possibly asking if they want to insert a statement in special provisions of your contract that says the property must appraise for no less than the sales price. And if it fails to do so, the buyer may receive a refund of their earnest money. So in paragraph 11, special provisions, on page, what is that, 4? Page 5 of the contract is special provisions where we can say, Mr. Buyer, just want to tell you, this leaves you open for the property not appraising for the sales price since you're putting a significant amount of cash down. Would you like to put a phrase in special provisions that gives you the right to terminate if the property doesn't appraise for at least the sales price? And they say yes. So, in paragraph 11, I would state something like, property must appraise for no less than sales price. If it fails to do so, buyer may terminate and receive a refund of the earnest money. So you only need to do that anytime a buyer is putting more than 20% down. If they're putting 20% or less down, paragraph 4A1, this little sentence right here, gives them all the protection they need based on the fact that the property must appraise. Okay? Now, the other thing that comes into this little field here is condition. So sometimes the property has to meet a condition. It has to be in a certain condition for the buyer, for the lender to make a loan against the property. The value may be there, but the condition may not be there. Let's take, for example, a beach house down at Bolivar that was damaged by Hurricane Ike. Maybe when it was a full beach house, it was worth $300,000. I came along, did some damage to it. Now it's only worth $200,000. And our seller and buyer agree to $200,000. The appraiser goes out there and says, well, it's worth $200,000 based on the condition that it's in, but it has no windows and the air conditioner's gone. And this lender is going to require that there be windows and an air conditioning system. So it's a condition issue at that point. So be cautious sometimes on property that might still have value, but might not be in condition. If it's a rehab project, you need to let the lender know up front that this is a rehab, because then they'll do a different type of an appraisal on the property to ensure that it does meet their criteria. Okay? Doesn't mean we can't make the loan. Just don't surprise your lender with the fact that, oh yeah, I knew it was in that condition. I just thought, I just wanted to appraise it for that. I'm going to fix it. Well, it doesn't matter. We need for that appraisal to be done based on what it's in now and what it can be once it's been repaired. Okay? All right, so now let's talk about credit. This is basically stating that the property, the buyer's ability to purchase the loan or purchase the property on this loan, has got two different levels of criteria. The property must meet the lender's underwriting requirement, and the buyer's credit must meet the lender's underwriting requirement. Okay? Now, we have a couple of choices here. We can say that the buyer's ability to purchase based on credit is subject to approval, or we can say it is not subject to approval. We've got two boxes there. And you've got to check one of those two boxes. If you're doing a government loan, you must check box A. If you're not doing a government loan, then you've got a choice of either A or B. B would basically mean that my buyer's credit is approved by the lender. There's no need for the lender to do any kind of verification at this point because they've already done all the verifications. They've pulled a full credit report. They've done their employment verifications, their deposit verifications. The funds have all seasoned at the right amount of time in the checking accounts. There's really no issue about the buyer's credit worthiness that could keep him from being approved for the loan. Now that's rare that we have buyers that are at that point. Most of them have just been pre-approved by a lender. They've had a conversation with a lender where the lender has said, how much money do you make? Tell me about your bills, and oh, by the way, I'm going to pull a credit report. And that's it. They haven't done all the verification process that comes with the actual loan application process. So it's rare that you would ever do B, but every now and then you might have a buyer who is at B. And if you're at B, it's a much stronger offer than one that's A, because basically we're telling the seller, the only issue that needs to be resolved right now is the property must meet the lender's underwriting requirement because the buyer has already been approved by the lender. Okay? So most of the time we're going to be checking A. It says it is subject to the buyer being approved, and we're going to describe that condition in the attached third-party financing addendum. So if you'll turn to that, it should be right behind your contract. If we find the third-party financing addendum. So we've checked box 4A, 2A, and we are now ready to fill out our third-party financing addendum. Under this, we're telling the seller, here's the type of loan and the terms of the loan that the buyer is seeking. However, he needs to have a specific amount of time in order to determine whether or not he can get credit approval for that type of loan. And that's the very first blank that we've got to fill out up in that top paragraph. Often overlooked by us real estate agents because our eyes are kind of drawn to the boxes in the middle of the page. We're ready to start checking boxes. But we need to remember there's a little bitty blank up there in that top paragraph that's a very important little blank right before the word days. So we're saying, Mr. Seller, my buyer needs this amount of time in order to determine whether or not he can obtain credit financing approval. Not loan approval, credit financing approval. If he can't, in that amount of time, he has the right to give you notice and receive a refund of his earnest money. If that amount of time passes, and his ability to close is now based on the fact that his credit is not approved sometime before closing, then he's in default. And the seller can take the remedies of default, which is typically the earnest money. So it's very important that we give our buyer plenty of time and that we, their agent, help hold them accountable to that amount of time. So what's the appropriate amount of time we want to try to negotiate on behalf of our buyer? As much as possible is the right answer, right? But what's likely? You know, buyers want as much time as possible. What does the seller want to give them? As little amount of time as possible. So we need to come up with something reasonable. In the market we're operating in right now, we're probably in that 15 to 20 day range. 20 is probably pretty generous. 15 is probably pretty appropriate. Anything less than 15 is pretty aggressive. And your buyer's got to be really focused on that process. When we were in a buyer's market, you could negotiate 25 or 30 days. The seller was just tickled to death to have an offer on their home. So they were willing to give some pretty gracious terms. But in the market we're in right now, where it's very much a seller's market, Sellers can be a little bit more demanding about making that as short as possible. So 15, 20 days is typically what gets negotiated there in that top paragraph. Once you have that time period determined in a contract and it's an agreed contract, you should pull out whatever calendar system you're using and put an alarm that goes off the day before that time expires that says the Smith's third-party financing expires tomorrow, so that you've got 24 hours to work with them and their lender to find out where they are. Are we good? Everyone feeling good about this? Because if not, our buyer needs to either do one of two things. He either needs to terminate and get his earnest money back, or he needs to ask for an extension to see if he can't get more comfortable with his ability to get his credit financing approved. Okay? Don't think the lender's doing that for you. They're not. They don't even probably look at that page. They're not worried about it. You've got to be worried about it for them. So hold your buyer and the loan officer accountable to that amount of time, so that there's no question about if it goes past that amount of time and the lender kept saying, oh no, you're good, you're good, you're good, and they're not good, you can go back to your buyer and say, I tried to tell you. I reminded you guys. You had an opportunity a week ago to give notice, and now your lender has pulled the rug out from underneath you. Okay?
In this type of market, how, like if you are trying to do like an extension to it, do most sellers just kind of say?
I think it depends on the amount of time. If you're looking for maybe 3 or 4 days, they're probably, if you're looking for another 10 days or something like that, they're probably going, oh gosh, that doesn't sound good. No, please terminate and get out of the way so I can put the house back on the market and get maybe a more qualified buyer. All right, so then you're going to check the boxes down in paragraphs A, B, C, D, or E on the type of loan that the buyer is going for. These terms and conditions should come from the loan officer. So if you haven't had a conversation with the loan officer yet, now is a good time to have one and follow up with them and go, hey, I know you met with the Smiths yesterday. We're writing an offer this afternoon. What did y'all talk about? Are they going conventional? Are they going government? What's up? Are they going to go conventional? Great. How much do they get put down? You know, get the terms and conditions from the loan officer so that you can help them in filling out this page. Now, if they're going FHA, which would be C, it asks for a type of FHA loan they're going for, the section. And the run-of-the-mill, normal, everyday FHA loan is a 203B. So 203B goes in that section blank. There are some other types of FHA loans, but that's your normal purchase money FHA loan. If it's something different, the loan officer will tell you. Okay? And I think the rest of the blanks will primarily make sense to you as you read them. Okay. So back to our contract. So does everyone feel good with paragraphs 3, 4, and the third-party financing? The reason I go over these together is because if we were doing a conventional loan for $180,000 in our offer, we've written 180 3 different times in our offer. Page 1, paragraphs 3 and 4, and then back on our third-party financing, we put $180,000 down, right? If we make the offer at $200 and we end up making a change to $205, which is then going to change the, these numbers, whatever they come out to be, then we need to make sure that if we changed it here, we change it here, and we change it on the third-party financing. So once the contract is fully executed by all parties, those numbers all need to match and be exactly the same. Don't just think, oh, well, I got this right. It all needs to match. Make sense? Okay. Let's go to the top of page 2. Earnest money. So we don't necessarily have to have earnest money for a contract to be a valid contract. However, if both parties agree to earnest money, then earnest money is required. They don't have to agree to earnest money, but if they do want earnest money, then it needs to be included in paragraph 5. In our market, typically 1% is probably a pretty good rule of thumb on the amount of earnest money. And it doesn't have to be an exact 1%. I mean, it's kind of a vague 1%. So in our example here, $2,000 would go in paragraph 5. And then we're going to state who that earnest money is going to be put on deposit with, the escrow agent. Now sometimes when we see the word agent, we think of a person. But in this instance, it's an entity. And the entity is the title company majority of the time. It could be an attorney's office, but most of the time it's going to be a title company. First American Title, Capital Title, Stewart Title, whoever it is that you're planning to use for the title company. So let's stop and talk about right now who gets to pick the title company. Because that always seems to be a point of contention. It should be a mutually agreed process. However, you will see listing agents put in agent remarks that they would prefer that you use a certain title company. And they'll sometimes make statements like, seller will pay for a title policy if you use this title company. I personally believe that's a poor policy that agent's following. They should leave it open for the buyer to decide where they want to use, where they want to close the transaction. Anytime an agent is directing business to a specific title company, in my opinion, it's calling attention to themselves, and you start questioning what benefit is that agent getting by sending specific transactions to a title company.
And also, I think making itself insecure.
Yeah. There is a law called P53 under the State Board of Insurance. The title insurance companies are regulated by the State Board of Insurance like we're regulated by the Texas Real Estate Commission. And the title insurance in the state of Texas is regulated highly. And in fact, what you pay for title insurance at one title company is exactly the same that you'll pay at another. There's no change. So if one title company is getting all the business, the State Board of Insurance kind of looks at them and goes, why are you getting more business? And it could be because they might be giving favors to the agents that are sending business their direction. And if you're caught in that kind of scenario, not only does the title company get fined up to $10,000, but the provider, producers, we get fined up to $10,000. So be super cautious about getting drawn into that scenario. There are a few instances where it might be appropriate for the listing agent to say, we prefer this title company. Relocations and foreclosures. Those are two where there has really probably been some title work done, and so you really want to stay with the same title company to make sure that you don't have any problems down the road. But everything else is wide open, okay? So, I never let title be the reason we weren't able to put a transaction together. If I was making an offer on someone's listing out in the Humboldt-Kingwood area, and the listing agent said, I really would love to use such and such title company. Well, if there's a title company that I thought was a good title company, I'd go, great, I like using them too. And we would put them down. There was probably only one that I would kind of grit my teeth and kind of go, really? Because it was more the service they provided than anything else. They just didn't provide good service. You felt like you always had to call them to get answers. They weren't ever sending stuff on time and stuff like that. So, you know, most of the time, I didn't let it bother me. So don't get too uptight about it. Try to find a title company that provides great service and that's convenient for all the parties. To me, that's the important part, okay? Convenience.
So I have listing agents said, why don't we do a star text because of the seller will pay, so I agree that, but they are in far away Cyprus. And then I request Galleria,
Yeah.
because halfway from me, far away 290, and then they said they will do it, but people will need to be sent it to Cyprus, but they will do courtesy in Galleria.
Yeah, yeah. So I think finding, well, to me, it needs to be convenient for the clients,
Yeah.
not necessarily us.
We do, so
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, and maybe most of your clients are down the southwest side of town too.
Yeah,
so,
Belly
yeah.
also.
Yeah. In paragraph 5, it also has a place for what we call a staged title deposit, earnest money deposit. That doesn't really ever get used. I think the state, when they wrote this paragraph, believed that a lot of times people would put 0 or very little earnest money down, and then put more earnest money down after the option period was over. But most parties haven't done it that way. They've all really kind of agreed to put the earnest money up all at once at the very beginning. But if you had a scenario where someone wanted to do a staged deposit, then paragraph 5 gives you the opportunity to do that. Paragraph 6 talks about who's going to pay for the title insurance policy and who is going to be issued by. So paragraph 6A, who's going to pay for it? Is it a buyer's expense or a seller's expense? It's usually a seller's expense. And the title insurance usually costs just under 1% of the sales price. So it's not, like I said earlier, it's a state-regulated amount. In fact, all the title companies will give you a rate chart if you want to use it. And you know, even if you had Stewart Titles Company's rate chart, it's the same as First American's because they all charge the same amount. So if you wanted to carry around a rate chart, you could. A lot of them now have offered apps. Have you seen their apps? Title companies have apps you can put on your phone, and that kind of helps you calculate. If someone's curious about what it would cost, you can use the app for that. Then down in paragraph 6 and 6.8, they've now added this question. This came out almost a year ago when they updated the contract. This coverage was always there, available for a buyer, but it wasn't in the contract asking them if they wanted it. So the title insurance policy covers good and clear and correct title transfers from one party to the next. The title company, when they do the title research, can research to determine that it does not appear to be any missing parts in the chain of title over the time that the property has been owned. But they now offer, and have been offering for a while, not only title insurance coverage, but this boundary coverage. And that's what number 8 covers. So that the buyer can not only have good and clear title insurance, they can also have insurance to say, this truly are the boundaries of the property that I'm purchasing. So if I bought a house and it had a survey, and I have the survey, has my house on there and the driveway, you know, the sidewalk that comes out, showing all the improvements. And there it is, and it shows, you know, where the fence is, you know, all the way around the property. And I want this coverage, and I get it. And then after closing, the neighbor comes over and he says, oh, I just want to let you know, I tried to tell the other owner, but your property is actually 4 feet inside my property. And y'all need to move your fence over because my survey shows that your fence is 4 feet on my property. Well, if you have this coverage, you could go back to the title insurance company and go, I have a claim against my boundary, and you guys need to figure it out for me. They'll either pay for whatever the issue is that needs to be resolved, or they'll defend that your survey's good and it's this guy's survey that's bad, you know, they'll come to your defense if you've got this coverage, okay? So if you want it, then you basically would check the second box. So you would check the number 2 box, saying will be amended to read. And then you've got to select who's paying for that additional coverage. That additional coverage costs approximately 5% of the title insurance policy. So if we had a $2,000 title insurance policy, then we're talking about $100 additional coverage for this. So it's not expensive. In fact, when most buyers are kind of presented with it, they're like, oh yeah, I want that. And most buyers are willing to pay for it. It's really the buyer's benefit to pay for it. So it's typically a buyer's expense. The one above is a seller's expense in 6A, and then in number 8, if you decide to get the coverage, that's typically a buyer's expense, okay? All right, paragraph C, survey. We've got 3 different options as far as the survey is concerned. Number 1, if the seller has an existing survey, then he can provide that existing survey to your buyer along with an affidavit stating that that's a true and correct survey. The second option is that the buyer can buy a new survey. And the third option is that the seller can buy a new survey for the buyer. Now, our position as agents and as a brokerage is that we believe it's best for our clients to always get a new survey. But if they choose not to, and the seller has an existing survey, then they can elect to choose box number 1, stating that they're willing to take that existing survey. So in C1, you're typically going to be checking that they can get that usually within 3 days, maybe 4 days, a very short period of time that survey be delivered to your buyer. And that the affidavit signed by the seller also be delivered to the buyer. So both of those items have to be delivered within the amount of time that you select in paragraph C1. Now the second sentence of that paragraph says, and I love it when the state puts things in bold because they make us think that we're going to learn it better if it's in bold. It says, if the seller fails to furnish this survey or the affidavit within the time prescribed, buyer shall obtain a new survey at seller's expense no later than 3 days prior to closing. So it's super important that if the seller signed a contract saying, I'm going to give you my survey and an affidavit, that they do so within the amount of time agreed to there in C1. The third sentence says that if the survey and the affidavit were provided, but they're not acceptable to either the title company or the buyer's mortgage company, then a new survey will have to be ordered, and that expense for that survey will typically be the buyer's expense. It's negotiable, but it's typically the buyer's expense. Now, if there's not an existing survey, sometimes the seller goes, I don't have a survey to give you, then you can't choose number 1. You got to move on to number 2 or number 3. And in either one of those, depending on which one you're going to pick based on who's going to pay for it, you need to give yourself plenty of time. Usually, you want to get beyond the option period. So the option period is typically, what, 10 days long? So I would put 12, 15 days in the amount of time for the buyer or the seller to purchase a new survey, if you knew you needed to do C2 or C3.
So 10 to 15 days?
Yeah.
Just in- So the first one is 3 to 4 days?
Yes.
C1.
Now when I say 3 to 4, don't put 3-4. It's 3 or 4. Yeah. All right, paragraph D, objections. Now, the buyer's getting lots of stuff listed up above here in paragraph 6, all above down to this point. And those things are being delivered to him over time at different time intervals. It could be that something is delivered to the buyer and he objects. Like the survey. He gets the survey and it shows that the house is built 1 foot into the building line of the setback of the property. Well, he can say, I object. Mr. Seller, you need to go back to the county or whoever and get approval for the fact that that house was built outside the building line, and I want that variance so that I don't have to deal with that as the owner of the property. Or maybe it had a pool and the pool was built inside the utility easement. Well, you can object and say, go fix that. In other words, don't dig up the pool and fix it, but go to the utility companies, get a variance for the fact that your pool that you put in is inside their utility easement. And you can get those things documented and recorded in the title records. There could be other items that he receives, and he has the opportunity to object if he discovers that something is going to prohibit a specific use or activity on the property. So if your buyer has a really specific use or activity that he wants to make sure he can do on this property, and he states it here in paragraph D, if during the delivery of this documents, he discovers, well, I can't do that now, then he can object to that specific use or to the fact that I can't do that. Let's say that I wanted to put, I like working on antique cars, and the reason I'm buying this house is because I want to put a 20 by 40 garage on the back of the home, and there's plenty of land for me to do that. So he puts in paragraph D, construct 20 by 40 metal building garage behind home, something like that. Well, as he receives some of these documents, the title commitment, the deed restrictions, the survey, whatever, and the deed restrictions show up and he goes, well, the deed restriction says that the biggest outbuilding I can have besides the main structure of the home is a 20 by 20 building, then I'm screwed. I can't build as big of a building as I want. I object. Okay? So it's good for you if you've got a buyer that's got a really specific use or activity. Number one, you need to know about it, right? And if he wants to, he can make his purchase contingent upon him making sure he can do that on the property by inserting it here in paragraph D. Now, just below that, you're going to give him the number of days he has to put his objection in writing. So, that could be 5 days, it could be 7 days. You just pick the amount of time that he would have to give his objection once he receives that information. Now, if it's just a regular run-of-the-mill house, there's not a whole lot you're going to have to worry about here. But if you've really got a buyer who's buying property for a specific reason, it's probably worth inserting that here so that you make sure that he's covered in the event that that activity or use is prohibited by deed restrictions or city ordinance or whatever. Okay? All right, next page. Membership in a POA, Property Owners Association, there in E2. The MLS will state whether or not the home is located in a neighborhood that's got mandatory membership in a POA. If it is, then you want to check the appropriate box. And you'll want to include the addendum for mandatory membership in a POA. So if you'll flip back to your package here, we're going to come right behind that third-party financing addendum to the addendum for membership in a POA. Everyone got it? All right. So, there will be times when you're pulling the documents that the listing agent has provided, and this form is one of those forms that is already scanned into the MLS for you. It's already signed by the sellers, and the box that's checked by the sellers is number 4 there under paragraph A. And you're kind of like, well, I guess that's the form we need to use. I got it with the seller's disclosure, I'm just going to use this form. Well, you need to be cautious about that because you need to explain to your buyers what this form means. So, the buyer has the right in this form to get information from the Property Owners Association. And that information is described up at the top in what they call subdivision information. It's really 3 pieces of information. It's the bylaws of the association, it's the deed restrictions of the association, and it's this thing called a resale certificate. Everyone see that listed there in number A? You can underline them. Bylaws, resale certificate, and restrictions. Those are the 3 things that the buyer has the right to get. And most people know what deed restrictions are. Most people know what the bylaws are. But they have no clue what a resale certificate is. Well, I've given you a copy of the resale certificate. So if you want to show them, this is a blank resale certificate. This is what the Homeowners Association would have to fill out about the property and about themselves and deliver it to you. Do you want this information? And they look through this list and they go, this is good stuff. I think I need to know all this. So if we go back to our form, we've got 2 ways to get it. Number 1, A1, is that the seller is going to pay for it and deliver it to us. A2 is the buyer is going to pay for it and get to have it delivered to him. Number 3 is the seller already has the information and now can deliver it to the buyer, and the buyer is just acknowledging receipt of the information. And like I said earlier, the seller could have already sent this over to you with number 4 check saying that the buyer does not require the delivery of the information. So why would a seller not want the buyer to get the information? Well, if you go back and read number 1 and number 2, it basically says that once the buyer gets the information, which is going to take about a week to 10 days for him to get, he's got 3 days, I think, 3 days after he gets it to terminate for any reason. So it kind of creates this other option period that's out there besides the first option period. So most sellers are like, I don't want to give this buyer any more opportunities to get out of this deal. So if he wants to buy my house, he can just waive his right to that information. So that's why the seller will sometimes send this form over along with their other forms. But it's improper for you as the agent just to say, well, here's the form we got, why don't you sign here? You really need to walk through with them what their opportunities are, okay?
So you are saying buyer has a choice, not the seller check on and then send it to buyer, and to sign?
Well, what I'm saying is the seller might have sent this form over with the seller's disclosures, and it's already signed.
Yeah.
You need to go over with a form with your buyer and decide what he wants. If he wants the information, then you need to pull out a blank one and check the appropriate box.
And we don't sign
Don't sign the other one, or you just waive your right to it.
Okay.
Okay?
This would normally be a buyer's expense if they want to get one.
Typically, yeah, because most sellers, and it's not cheap, it's probably anywhere from $150 to $200. There are some neighborhoods that require the delivery of the information. We've got one over in the Elmley area, Summerwood. They have it in their bylaws that everyone has to get the information every time the property sells. So there's no option of not giving it or giving it. They've got to give it. And so usually over there what happens is that when listing agents take the property listed, they just go ahead and order the information. They've got it ready for the buyer to get once they write the offer. So,
And that's all 3 of the items you named?
yeah, it's the package.
Okay.
You use it as included over at Summerwood on that? Because there's a fee for it, it's just part of.
Yeah, they've already got it too. Yeah.
So number
Resale
2 is
certificate.
saying buyer has to pay this one.
Right. First one is seller's paying for it. Number 2, buyer's paying for it. Number 3 is saying seller already has it and the buyer's just acknowledging the receipt of it. The seller already ordered it and has it ready to go.
Already.
Like I said, over in Summerwood, they many times will do that. They'll go ahead and deliver it and have it ready to go.
So how many days you think gonna?
10.
All 3 are
Yep.
all 2 are 10.
Well, it's only 2, right?
two, number one and number two.
Yeah. Then down below in fees, you've got a fee for the change of ownership. The management company is going to charge a fee to move it from the seller's name into the buyer's name. That usually is disclosed on the MLS, how much that transfer fee is. If it's not disclosed on the MLS, I would probably make an assumption that it's really close to about $75.
75.
That's down here
Yeah.
in C.
I sellers put $300.
That's
This
really
is
expensive.
Too much, yeah. And then finally he find out this is mandatory, so you don't need to. Title only fine.
Yeah, most of the title companies have a list of what the fees are per, for the common neighborhoods around them. They'll be able to tell you if you're dealing with a neighborhood, like if you were dealing with something close by, I'm sure First American down the street could tell you exactly what that neighborhood charges. So, all right, then down in paragraph E, this paragraph basically says that if the parties above agreed to not deliver the information, but in the process of opening title, the title company discovers that the delivery of the information is required. Let's say, for example, you guys took a listing in Summerwood, you didn't know. So you didn't get the thing. You got a buyer that came along and says, oh, I'll waive that, I don't need that. And then all of a sudden the title companies open up title and go, oh, these agents and the buyers and sellers didn't know that it's required to deliver this information. Then E says, who's paying for it? Down there in E. So I would suggest seller, but that's negotiable. All right, so back to our contract. We were on page 3. Let's skip to page 4 now. Property condition, paragraph 7. 7A has a statement in it that says that the seller is going to permit the buyer and the buyer's agents to access the property at reasonable times. Now, again, sometimes when we see the word agents, we sometimes think of real estate agents, but it could be anybody the buyer has hired to do work on their behalf. Those have become agents of the buyer. So the inspector is the buyer's agent. The insurance agent is the buyer's agent. The appraisal is the buyer's agent. Those are all agents of the buyer. Buyer may have the property inspected by inspectors selected by buyer and licensed by TREC, or otherwise permitted by law to make such inspections. Seller, at seller's expense, shall immediately cause existing utilities to be turned on and shall keep the utilities turned on during the time the contract is in effect. So that's really important language, that you want to make sure that sellers have their utilities turned on immediately and that they keep the utilities on the entire time the property is under contract. They can't just turn them on for the inspections and then turn them off. Once the house is under contract, they've got to leave them on the entire time the house is under contract. And then paragraph B, acknowledgement of the seller's disclosure. So B1 is the seller received the notice, which is ideal. You had it in the MLS, or you were able to call the listing agent, they sent it over, and your buyers had a chance to review it before submitting their offer. So typically B1 is ideal. You couldn't get the listing agent to send it over. Or maybe the listing agent said, you know what, I just put this house on the market this morning, I've got the seller's disclosure over with the seller, they're completing it this afternoon, they'll get it back to me, I'll get it to you as soon as I can. Well, write the offer and just put number 2, saying that the buyer must receive it within a short period of time. 1, 2, 3 days, short, okay? And then number 3 is the seller is not required to furnish the notice under the Texas Property Code. So you guys that have been in the class with me before, remember that there's typically 3 entities or 3 reasons why a seller does not have to deliver a seller's disclosure to the buyer per law. Do you remember what they are?
Foreclosures.
Foreclosures,
All
Yes.
foreclosures, estate
Somebody died.
estate sale,
Yeah.
New house?
New construction.
Construction, yeah.
So those are our three as to why you would check number 3, that the seller's not required to deliver that. Just because the seller never lived in the house, those are not valid reasons why the seller shouldn't have to deliver a seller's disclosure. Lead base paint, if it's applicable, it's noted there also. And then paragraph D, they rewrote this paragraph and hopefully made it clearer because they've now given the as-is definition up front. Because they're getting ready to have to check a box as to whether or not the buyer accepts the property as is. So let's read what paragraph D says. As is means the present condition of the property with any and all defects and without warranty except the warranties of title and the warranties in this contract. Buyer's agreement to accept the property as is under paragraph 71 or 2 does not preclude the buyer from inspecting the property under paragraph 7A, from negotiating repairs or treatments in a subsequent amendment, or from terminating this contract during the option period, if any. So now we have to check a box. Is the buyer going to accept the property as is, or is the buyer going to accept the property as is as long as the seller do the following repairs or treatments? So when you're going to check box 2, you've got to be specific. You've got to say, fix garage door, replace fence, repair sheetrock in master bedroom, whatever it is. There's going to be a specific repair or treatment that the buyer knows right now, I'm only going to buy this house if the seller does that. Don't put general phrases such as subject to inspections that do not identify specific repairs or treatments. So the majority of the time, we're going to be checking box 1, saying that the buyer accepts the property as is. Unless he's got a really specific repair or treatment he knows today he wants, then you can check box number 2. And then you list that specific repair or treatment. Next page, we've got an allowance for the property owner, residential service contract, also commonly known as home warranties. We've got all the home warranty folders over in the mailroom. So, one day when you're going to lunch, go grab them all and sit down and kind of review them as you're kind of eating your sandwich or your salad and look through and kind of get familiar with the prices that they all charge and kind of what they cover. Because all you're going to be putting in here is the value of the contract, not who's going to issue the contract. So we just need to put the premium here. So $375, $400, whatever that is, needs to go here to ensure that your buyer is going to get that home service contract. It's super important that we highly encourage our buyers to get that coverage. It's likewise just as important that when we're the listing agent, we encourage our sellers to offer that coverage. It's a huge risk reducer, and we want risk reduced. So help your buyers and sellers, encourage them to put that in there. I'm always flabbergasted by clients who negotiate away thousands of dollars of a contract, and then they get down to the final few $100s, and they go, all right, well, I'll give them that price, but I'm taking out that home warranty. Like, that is stupid, stupid. Leave the home warranty in. Do something else. But leave that home warranty in the transaction so that the buyer gets the benefit of that coverage, okay? And then in paragraph 9, we've got to identify the closing date. So we need to be looking at a calendar. We need to make sure that we give ourselves plenty of time to close this transaction. If it's going to be a conventional loan, you're probably looking at a minimum 25, 30 days. If you're looking at a government loan, you're probably looking at somewhere in the 40 to 45 day range. So give yourself plenty of time to close the transaction. The other thing that I would highly encourage you to do is keep your closings away from the last week of the month. That's when everyone's busy. So why would you want to get involved in all that busyness? Keep your closings at the mid to third week of the month. Your transactions will go so much smoother during that time of the month than will be at the end of the month. The lenders aren't as crazy, the title companies aren't as crazy, the movers aren't as crazy, the utility companies aren't as crazy. Put it at a time of the month when it's not as busy in all those service industries.
So what about FHA loan and VA loan? we have to go at least how many days?
I would do 40 to 45 days on government loans. The other thing that I would encourage you to do is stay away from closings on Fridays. If you looked at a calendar and you picked a Friday, and that transaction, for whatever reason, you know, the mortgage company is located in Oklahoma City and they get snowed in and they're not doing anything until Monday, are you closing on Friday? No, you're closing Monday. Now, if you had picked Thursday, you might not close on Thursday, but if you don't close on Thursday, you might close on Friday. So stay away from Fridays. I just think it causes a lot of grief. Yes, sir.
It seems like when we're picking a day, it's kind of arbitrary as long as it's got the number of days, but how firm is it once,
Well,
you pick it?
it's probably going to get moved,
Okay.
but you want to at least give yourself a good target, you know, when you're looking at a day. And you want to be looking at a calendar so that you can kind of make sure you're looking at days that are truly work days, not weekends. And of course, you want to avoid national holidays. Because if it's a national holiday, the title companies aren't open because the banks aren't open. And you know, we can remember the big days. We sometimes forget the little days. Sometimes Martin Luther King or Veterans Day or, you know, Columbus Day, those holidays that kind of go, oh yeah, the bank's not open today. So if the bank's not open, then the title company's not going to be open. All right, paragraph 10, possession. We need to either select possession upon closing and funding or possession according to a temporary residential lease. Now, possession and closing and funding means exactly that. The expectation should be that if we're closing this afternoon at 2 o'clock, that once we've been at closing and funds have been exchanged, the loan has funded, the seller's money has been delivered to them, that we get the keys, that we drive to the house and it's empty of all the seller's contents. That's possession at closing and funding. Anything other than that is not possession at closing and funding. If we show up at the title company and the sellers kind of breathlessly walk in and the listing agent comes over and goes, guys, their truck broke down, they've got 3 more loads this afternoon, but they'll be out by 7 o'clock tonight. So let's go ahead and close. Well, you need to turn to your buyers and go, guys, you're not getting possession at closing and funding. So you've got 2 choices. We can either close tomorrow, let them get out, if it's important to you to have possession at closing and funding, or we can get them to sign a temporary residential lease that says you're not giving us possession at closing and funding, and you're leasing the house back to us for 4 more hours, and you have authority to be in the house until 7 p.m. tonight. And you have the liability of what you might do to that house between now and 7 o'clock. So you want to document anything that might not be possession at closing and funding, and you would use that temporary residential lease form to do that.
And if they do neither, they don't sign they neither deliver possession nor they do the other thing.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said.
If the seller doesn't cooperate, what will happen?
Well, you turn to them and say, you're in default. You said that we would have possession at closing and funding today. You're not prepared to deliver that to us, so you're in default. I can sue you for damages. Now, most people won't.
And it will
They'll say, let's work this out. You know, we're willing to let you stay in the house until 7 o'clock tonight, but please sign this form saying that you're responsible for any damages you caused to the property between now and 7 o'clock tonight. Otherwise, you're trespassing on my property that I just bought. And I will call a sheriff if you show up at my house.
Which lease form is this, the buyer or seller's with them? Or
Do I?
the seller stay like that? Which form do you use?
You'll use the seller's temporary residential lease. Whoever is taking possession, that's the form you use. So a lot of times you'll know up front whether or not there could be a temporary residential lease issue. You've called the listing agent when you were making the offer and you said, hey, we're getting ready to make an offer on your house. What's the seller's situation? I noticed that they're currently occupying it. And they go, oh, they're gonna move it out next week. The movers are coming next weekend. They'll be gone. Okay, great, then I know to put possession of closing and funding in my contract. Or if they say something like, you know what, once they get this house sold, they're gonna be buying another house in the neighborhood next door, something a little bit bigger and newer. So it would be great if we could get possession for 3 days after closing so that they can close on this sale, close on their purchase, and have time to move out. Well, now I can prep my buyers and say, guys, you know, let's do this. Let's make the offer. Let's give them possession for 3 days. We know up front we're going to give them possession right off the bat. And at the time we write the offer, we include that lease. We don't wait till closing to sign the lease. We're signing the lease today when everyone's in a good mood about selling the house. Okay?
What's typical rent, I guess you call it?
Yeah, I think it depends. You know, if you're doing like a courtesy issue, like 2 or 3 days, I've many times seen they just give it to them, just free. If it's longer than that, then I think it's worthwhile to come up with a rental amount. What I've seen normal is to take the buyer's new mortgage payment, divide it by 30, and you end up with a daily rate that would be compensating the buyer for the fact that they're not occupying the house during that time. I would almost always collect a security deposit. So make sure that the security deposit is something that would easily cover some minor damage or having the house cleaned if they absolutely left it in an atrocious manner. Okay, $500. We usually don't think about the security deposit here like we would on a regular lease house. You know, if it's a $2,000 a month lease house, we're looking for a $2,000 security deposit. I don't think you have to get that big of a security deposit. Okay? People will perform if money's on the line, right? So you've got the seller's temporary residential lease in your package, so you can kind of review it. It's very simple. It doesn't have a lot in it. So the last 2 pages of your package basically talks about when it terminates, how much the rent's going to be, how much the deposit's going to be, pets, special provisions. On the second page there, holding over paragraph 19, that would be a rate that the seller would pay if he fails to vacate the property as he's agreed. And that should be a significant daily rate. It should make the Four Seasons look like a bargain. You should move out and move into a hotel, because it will be cheaper for you to do that than to stay in my house. Now there is a buyer's temporary residential lease, which allows the buyer to take possession prior to closing. Now my advice on that is, if you can make it through your entire real estate career without ever using that form, good job. Because it is not a good scenario to let buyers to take possession of the property prior to closing. It just always seems to blow up in everyone's face. So avoid buyers moving in prior to closing.
So sellers should do, if they can't close this date, they should extend the closing date. This would be better instead of.
It depends.
Yeah, it depends on.
I mean, if you know, if a seller knows
Yeah.
up front, I'm selling this house and I'm moving across town to that house, and I need the equity out of this house to buy that house. Well, I'm not going to move out of my house on the day that I'm supposed to close, hoping that you close so I can close tomorrow. I would rather close with you, then pack, and go buy the house that I'm going to do. So I'm going to negotiate as a seller a temporary lease. I want that. And if you're a good buyer, you'll give it to me. You'll make your buyer look good to me, and I'll accept your offer over someone who demands possession of closing and funding. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right, last couple of things on our form and then we'll be done. Okay. Special provisions. Paragraph 11. We already talked about the one item that could go in there, right? Possibly making the appraisal condition issue there. If you had someone putting more than 20% down, making sure that the property appraised for no less than the sales price. It's a place to insert any other factual statements or agreements that are not covered anywhere else in the contract or by any other addenda. So we're not going to put language in here talking about the seller's right to remain in the property for 3 days after closing, right? We're going to do that in a temporary residential lease. We're not going to put language in here that says that the buyer's ability to purchase is contingent upon the sale of their home that they currently own. No, we've got an addendum for that. So you don't put anything in here that can be covered with another agreement or that's already covered in the agreement. We're really looking for factual statements, business agreements that need to be made here that aren't covered by any other forms. When I first started in real estate, if you can imagine this page, special provisions was where number 10 is, and the whole rest of that page was blank. And we would type stuff in. And over the years, they've come up with forms that have replaced what we were consistently putting in there. So that it made it more uniform and made it better. So now, my God, you can barely put 3 sentences in there. Okay, last couple of items. Let's look to page 7, paragraph 21. Notices. You've got 4 different ways for one party to give notice to the other party. Either by sending something to a physical address, calling them, faxing them, or emailing them. It's ideal for you to have at least 3 ways that the other party could contact your party. Now, don't be putting your name and your contact information in there. Put your client's contact information in there. If you put your information in there, then you have now taken on the responsibility of making sure that any notice you get, you pass on immediately to your client. So it's best to actually have your client's contact information there. Now, I have agents go, well, I don't want my client's information in there. The sellers will call them. Well, you know, they might. Guess what? They'll probably figure out how to call them anyway. It's better to have correct contact information on there so that if there is a need to deliver a notice from one party to the next, they know exactly how and where to do that. Paragraph 22, agreement of the parties. So here is included potential addenda that could go with our contract. Several of these will always kind of be included, but there could be times where you might not have very many of them. There could be times where you have more. So these are the most common ones. Several of them we cover today. Some of them we cover at one of our future classes. But the way this works is that if you've got an addenda that needs to be a part of the agreement, it becomes an extension of the agreement. You can't have the contract executed and not the third-party financing addendum executed. I had an agent the other day that was calling me up with a question, and it sounded to me like the contract was executed, but she was asking me questions about the third-party financing, and I said, now wait a minute. Are you telling me you've got an executed contract? Yeah, we executed it 2 days ago. I said, then why are you negotiating your third-party financing addendum condition? She goes, because we didn't get that done. I said, no. It all goes together. If you're making the third-party financing a part of your contract, you can't execute the contract if the third-party financing is still being negotiated. It all needs to get executed all at once. So if you've got something that goes with your contract and it's checked here, it all needs to be signed at exactly the same time that the contract is executed. Okay? All right, last item is the option period. So there at the top of the next page is the termination option. So this is the buyer's ability to terminate the contract for any reason within a specific time, as long as he pays the option fee and as long as the option fee is collected by the listing brokerage or the seller within 3 days after the contract is executed. So typically, we negotiate maybe a 10-day option period. Now keep in mind, anytime we say days in a contract, and we've talked about lots of different parts of days, right? 2 days here, 3 days there, 8 days there, whatever. Anytime we say days, we're talking calendar days. There's no such difference between working days, business days, holidays. They're all calendar days in the contract, okay? And when is day one? Is day one today or is day one tomorrow?
Day one is tomorrow.
Day one is tomorrow. You're correct. Yeah. So if I had a 1-day option period, it doesn't end tonight at midnight. It ends tomorrow at midnight. And my contract was executed today. Okay? So anytime we talk days, day one is tomorrow. So the fee, I would say probably starts at $100. It could be a little bit less than that. I've seen them as low as $50, which I think the seller is absolutely crazy for accepting a $50 option fee. But if that's what they accept, then that's their problem, not mine. And it goes up. It can go up as the home gets more expensive. I've seen $1,000 option fees.
Yeah, I did that. My buyers, wants the property, he said it. I said, you're going to lose it when you back up. He wants the property.
And usually you're checking the box that it will be credited back at closing. So the last part of that paragraph says that the option fee will or will not be credited at the sales price at closing. Usually you're checking the box that says will. If attorneys are going to be involved and the parties want to identify who their attorneys are, then those get identified there in paragraph 24. So let's talk about how this flows. So I have my loop that I've created, right? And I'm going to name it offer loop, so I can keep my loops straight, or my folders inside my loops, that's what I should say. Because I might have another folder down here that was the buyer agreement loop. Not loop, folder, keep saying loop. So, I've got my documents that I submitted to my buyer initially when we first met, and, emailed them to them, and they were all executed. So I have those there. Now, I have made the decision to write an offer, and I took the template and I downloaded all the forms that I needed for that loop inside my folder. I then click on them and start filling them out. And it's just the forms that we talked about here. There will be times where I will need to add to this folder. Right? What's some of the things that I would probably add to the folder, that I would upload into the folder? Well, it would be things that I got from the listing agent, seller's disclosure, right? There could be maybe the pre-approval letter from their lender. Copy of the checks. They've given me checks, which is super important that they bring their checkbook if they're going to run an offer, and I'm going to make a photocopy of those checks, and I'm going to upload those into my offer loop. So I now have completed everything. I've submitted it to my buyer. They've shared and have signed what they need to sign. And now I can call up the listing agent and go, Sally, my buyer's made the decision to write an offer on your listing. Are you familiar with dotloop? Do you work with dotloop? And many times they will. They'll say, yes, that'd be great. If you could, just send me that loop. I'll be happy to present that offer to my seller. Sometimes they'll go, you know what, I never deal with all that kind of stuff. Can you just email it to me? Can I email this to her? Yeah, I can. Everything in my folder, I can email directly to her as a PDF. So I can send all that over to her as a PDF. Or she might say, you know what, can you just bring it by my office? I'm just down the street here at Remax Northwest. Could you just print it off and bring it to me? Yeah, I can do that too. So I can print all these off and make a package and deliver it to her office. So however she wants to receive that offer and deliver it to her seller, I want to be super accommodating and try to help her with that. So what's going to happen is she's going to present that offer to her sellers, and then normally she's going to call me back up or email me back with a response. Now I'm going to then get back in touch with my buyers and go, great news, we got a response. Here's what they want to see changed on our offer. So we go through the list of items that the seller says they want changed. We then come up with the things that we're going to accept or we want to have them consider. So we call her back up or email her back up and say, well, thank you so much, and here's what we would like to see done. We don't really go back and make changes to what we've done yet. We're just communicating back and forth between the two parties. Okay? Even though the software gives us the capability of going in and fixing stuff, leave it alone. Okay? Just communicate back and forth between the parties and take really good notes. Once you've got a verbal agreement between the two parties, it now is incumbent upon me, the buyer's agent, to fix what needs to be fixed and have my buyers re-execute those documents and submit them back to the listing agent so that she has a complete package of what matches exactly what we verbally agreed to. At that point, I want to also deliver to her the option fee check so that she can present that to the sellers immediately. She's then going to get her sellers to execute the contract, sign and initial where they need to sign. She's going to put the executed date in the contract and get it back to me either inside Dotloop or email it back to me, however she delivers that back to me. And I'm going to make sure that I have a contract in here that is reflective of what we've all agreed to. I'm going to look and make sure that what she sends back was fully executed by the other party. If I see something that's missing, if they did an initial page 2 of the contract, I need to call her up and go, Joanne, we missed getting page 2 of the contract. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that. Let me get back in front of them and I'll get that to you as soon as possible. So make sure that everything gets signed as it's supposed to be signed. As soon as it is signed, then I want to get a copy of that contract along with the earnest money check to the title company. I want to get a copy of that contract to my buyer's loan officer. And of course, if I've got it in here, then I can share it with my buyers and they've already got a copy of the contract. They can look at it all day long if they wanted to. Make sense? And then we're off to the races under our option period, which we talk about in the other class.
So do you find that it's good, like you send over a contract, now you're at the point where you're attaching some type of change, whatever document it is, to resend the entire contract, like in the third party finance, like all the documents all over again with this added, or just adding the, or just
I would probably
providing the
send it
added
all over again just to make
so it's all
sure.
together.
Yeah.
Well, and what did you say to the gentleman who said that I am executing the, I have executed the contract, but I am executing the
Still working on the third-party financing? Yeah.
Yes, financial agreement.
I said
What was your response to
Well,
that?
I told him, I said, you need to call the other agent and say, we do not have an executed contract. And until we get the third-party financing agreed to, that executed contract is not valid.
Yes.
So until we can get the, don't be thinking we've got an executed contract, because we don't.
But that is the correct approach to give notice to the other side that this is the situation on the ground, and that is what you will.
Yeah, you can't have a third-party financing that's been dated 2 days after the contract. They all need to be dated on or before the contract executed date.
So would they, like in that situation with the agent you were talking about, would they need to re-sign the whole thing, right?
Well, there would need to be a new
Or-
executed date.
or would you be
This
able
page
to
would
put
need to be
in-
changed.
Oh, okay, so you just
Yeah.
redo the one page.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think if I could say that once you have made some changes after after negotiations or deliberations, then a new loop should be presented rather than the original record is corrected, because the original record should remain as it is to prove that how the process went forward.
Well, the good thing about Dotloop is that it historically keeps the activities that you change. There is an activity log that if I change something, it logs that that was changed.
Right.
Even after someone has signed it, if I go back and change it, if I make a change to anything that was signed by a client, the signatures fall off.
Right.
So I can't make changes to something that was already signed. And the activity log inside of Dotloop keeps track of that.
Right.
So I don't have to, I see where you're saying that you would want to keep that historical document, but you don't necessarily have to because of the sophistication of the software. It's kind of doing that for you. If you want to do it that way, you could.
No,
But you don't have to. It's being done for you.
Yes.
All right. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. These are the
Go write an offer. It'll make so much more sense if you write an offer.
How do you like with the Maxwell, for number 12, settlements and other expenses?
Oh, we skipped over that one, didn't we? Paragraph 12A1B. So, thank you. I don't know how I missed that. It's because it's at the bottom of the page now, so I completely missed it. So, paragraph 12A1B is the seller's contribution to the buyer's closing cost. So, usually, it's somewhere in the 3 to 4% range if, after they've met with their lender, the lender has said they've got enough money for their down payment.